kind of felt like they're limping around. And then when the Patriots came back and scored again, it's like, all right, they just give up.
It did. It felt like, to me, it just felt like waving the white flag at that moment, because you're not playing a team like the Cardinals, or you're not playing a Dolphins team where you feel like, okay, we just got to get something, get a stop, then get another score. We'll be right back in this thing. You're playing New England. They had scored on 4 drives in the first half. You finally had it down to the 1 yard line. You don't have a play that you can like punch it in from 1 yard out. And again, like you said, if you go for it on 4th down and you don't convert, at least you have New England backed up on their own 1. Maybe it's a bad snap. Maybe something happens and you can at least get a safety, or you can pin them back and get decent field position. But to me, that was the whole point. You're down 3 possessions on the road versus a team that you haven't been able to stop in the first half. I feel like at that point, you've got to be a little bit aggressive there. You've got to try to get yourself the touchdown, change the momentum of the game, put a little bit of pressure on New England. They go from being up 20 to up 17. Well, that's not going to put any pressure on New England. They're just going to keep their foot on the gas at that point and do whatever they want. So I just felt at that point like Pittsburgh just felt outmatched all night. They seemed like they got outcoached. Ben, I don't know what he was doing. Half the time, I mean, he just looked completely out of sync with the wide receivers that they have. It got me almost to thinking, does this team really miss Le'Veon Bell and AB a lot more than they're leading on in terms of on the field?
I don't know about Le'Veon Bell. I mean, Connor did a really, really good job last year, although, in this game, 10 carries for 21 yards. That certainly is not a very good stat line, and didn't give them the ground game necessary to allow them to mix up their play calling. And then Roethlisberger just wasn't impressive through the air at all. No touchdowns, an interception, under 300 yards throwing. Juju Smith, he had 6 catches on 8 targets for 78 yards. But outside of that, a couple from Washington, a couple from Connor, not really a whole lot going on. So I would say that they definitely miss AB more than they miss Le'Veon Bell. Now, again, 1 game sample size against what we would say is a defending champion and a world champion contender with the Patriots. So we don't know how that's going to carry over in the next couple of games. But if we do see that this offensive production stays that low, then yeah, I think then you're looking at what kind of holes do we have here with the loss of AB. And if Connor doesn't keep it going like he did last year, was that a flash in the pan when he was motivated to cover for Le'Veon Bell, but really he isn't the guy going forward? Then you have a definite problem that's maturing in your locker room.
Absolutely. This is something to keep an eye on, how Ben's relationship with these young receivers, with Washington, with a new guy in the mix like a Moncrief, with Johnson there. Can that group come together? They'll get some home cooking this weekend. They have Seattle flying west to east for an early game, so that should help them. If they would have some struggles, though, this week in week 2, I think then you have to be a bit concerned, because the Ravens get the Cardinals in Baltimore. They should absolutely win that game. They could be 2-0. Steelers could be 0-2, and you're already staring up, down 2 games in your own division. That's not good when what we've seen some of these other performances out of some of these AFC teams. And Eric, probably the game of the week, I would say, happened in the first Monday night game, and that was the Texans at the Saints. Texans were in control of this game early. Saints come roaring back. Then it went back and forth with one of the craziest inside 2 minutes we've seen in a Monday night game for a while. So, Eric, this game all came down to me. Texans get a 2-play drive, get the touchdown, look like they are in the driver's seat. They get the Saints in a situation with 6 seconds left on the clock. Saints have a timeout. And for some reason, the Texans went into a prevent defense where they had everybody back, and they let Breeze get 8 yards like it was nothing. Receiver gives himself up. They get the timeout, and then they get a 58-yard field goal from Lutz. So what in the world were the Texans doing in that play with 6 seconds left? Why were they playing coverage that soft when everybody, including the much maligned Booger McFarland, called it correctly that Breeze is going to audible out? He's going to take the yardage, and they're going to get a field goal attempt to win the game.
Yeah, you're just playing with fire there, because you're playing against a quarterback that's just that good. He has that much experience. He is a past champion, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the history of this league. He's certainly smart enough to recognize what's going on. And I would say that Will Lutz is a very good kicker in this league. He's definitely in the top 10% of qualified kickers. So anytime you're going to give him more yards, more opportunity to get closer to the goalposts, well, that's a win for him. To me, it didn't make any sense. I would rather, if you're going to lose the game, I'd rather lose it by getting beat over the top on a miracle 50-yard pass. Well, of course, they've been there before with the Vikings, but Yeah, again, it's just one of those things where I think there's sometimes panic that sets in, and you wouldn't believe it being that it's the professional league in the NFL. But we do see it more often than not that the play calling, I mean, we saw it with Atlanta in the Super Bowl where play calling just sometimes just doesn't make any sense in situations where guys like us, sitting in our podcast studio and on our couches seem to have better ideas of how things should go in the game flow. I think your defense also has to be able to audible and make changes. I mean, if you see Breeze making a shift and making an audible, then you have to be prepared to make some of the adjustments to that as well. So all in all, good on the Saints for taking advantage of that. But I was impressed with what Deshaun Watson did there at the end. And at least he showed us that he can fight and fight and fight, which is something that you want out of a franchise quarterback.
Eric, this is why when we did the preview talking about the Texans initially, I made a comment about Bill O'Brien, and the stats showed it. This game makes him 42-39, and somehow he's won 3 or 4 divisions. So it's been a division that's been down, and they've been able to get to the playoffs, but I just don't buy into his coaching. I don't know what he is doing, and that play just highlights it. As a head coach, when you look out there and you look up at the clock and you go, okay, 6 seconds plus 1 timeout, they can use the entire field, they can get something quick, and they can get in field goal range, or they're going to take one play and bomb it deep. I think they're going to take the first option. They're going to try to get something underneath and get in field goal range. I think everybody else thought that, and the defense for the Texans, their coaching staff put their defense in a position to fail. And it's the same thing that's happening with this team. They give up a boatload to get Laramie Tunsil, and Deshaun Watson is still getting absolutely crushed. Every time that man drops back, he is getting hammered in the pocket. And you look across the division at what the Colts have gone through with losing Luck because he got the hell knocked out of him for his first 6 years. And you look at Watson's injury resume, it's looking very much like Andrew Luck's did. The collapsed lung. He has the back now. Of course, he did that to himself, but he got annihilated on the pass to Stills. And
yes, he did.
Eric, this is week 1. And he was already in the medical tent more than he was on the sideline throughout that game. So that to me is what the problem seems to be, is like, Bill O'Brien, you're going to have to figure out a way and come up with a better scheme to keep your quarterback upright. And obviously he's going to have to coach Deshaun Watson up as well of, okay, you can't just hold the ball and get creamed every single time. Sometimes you're just going to have to throw it away and we'll live to fight another play. If he gets knocked out, their season's done. And this is an extremely winnable division because one of the teams that could have challenged them, the Colts, lost their quarterback. One of the other teams that could have challenged them, the Jags, they lost their quarterback, Eric, is Nick Foles, who they signed $80+ million this offseason. He's now out indefinitely with a broken clavicle. So is Jacksonville's season over before it even starts? Do you have any faith in Gardner Minshew?
Who?
Let me ask you this. Would you rather have Minshew or Blake Bortles if you're a Jags fan?
I'd go with Bortles. I mean, at least you have
the worst poll question you've ever been asked.
At least you have the known other than the unknown. I mean, maybe I'm just not deep enough in the game of football to know who this guy is, but boy, I think it just, and you know what it is? It's also emotional. If you're the Jags, you gave up Bortles, you gave up a lot of money then to bring in Foles, a Super Bowl champion. And boy, doesn't it just feel like a kick right in the shin bone to lose him in week 1? I feel like it's an emotional loss for them. And I don't know that they are going to be able to overcome that. I think they're now a non-factor in that division because we talked about even in the previews that he really needed to play well for them and have their defense stay the same level of defense that they were in order for them to really have a chance in this division, because they've been bouncing back and forth the last couple of years, almost getting to the Super Bowl and then not looking very good the year after. And then it's like they're trying to Band-Aid and duct tape and paperclip things together. And now one of those Band-Aids just got ripped off. Yeah, I think they're in a bad spot.
I really don't know what to say because Gardner Minshew was at Washington State last year in Mike Leach's system, and he threw for a ton of yardage, had big-time stats, and he still was 22 of 25 in this game. But again, that's against the Chiefs' defense. So when he faces a defense that's better, and we talked about it openly when we were talking about the Chiefs, that they're going to win a lot of games just with their offense. Early in the season.
I mean, they scored 40 points, Justin, and this is the 19th game in a row that they've scored 26 points or more, which actually ties an NFL record. So they're winning on their offense. You're right.
And they lost Tyreek Hill early in this game. And now he's out 4 to 6 weeks, but he wasn't even a factor. He had 1 catch for 5 yards. He got slammed to the turf by Ramsey in this game, and then he was out. So it's not like they had Tyreek Hill and they had their full complements of weapons, they just had Sammy Watkins go absolutely nuts. He had one of those games that you would see Sammy Watkins have in Buffalo that would drive you crazy in fantasy or daily fantasy, where you're like, well, I've got a tournament. I've got 3 lineups. I better have Sammy Watkins in at least one of them, because you never know if he's going to go 3 for 40 or if he's going to go 7 for 200 and 2 touchdowns. And he just had one of those big performances. I lean to think that he probably is going to have more of those type of games if he can stay healthy, because he's got Mahomes and he's got good quarterback play now. So I don't know what to think of this Jags team. I want to give them a little bit of hope, because Minshew seems like he's a kind of a cool guy. He was talking even in the press conference about, what his Wonderlic score is and the backup that they brought in. Dobbs has got like an aerospace engineer, and how intelligent the quarterback room was with that guy in it. And just seemed like a guy that you kind of would want to root for. But Eric, this is another situation for a team that, again, their defense super chirpy, had the issues last year we saw with this whole thing fell apart. And now you're bringing in a rookie 6th-round pick that's going to have to lead this team for now. You start to wonder, when will the wheels fall off this bus? So I think that could happen, where they just don't give the guy time enough to get into the system and give him a chance, where this defense could implode if they lose a couple more of these games like that. But again, this division very much up in the air, this AFC South, because you had Tennessee look great on Sunday, but we don't expect to see that every single week. Colts look pretty decent with Brissett as quarterback. And again, the Texans, you never know if they can keep Watson upright. Eric, let's talk about a team that is going in the absolute wrong direction. And I think our prediction that they will go under their win total will be absolutely correct. So if you took that bet, you're looking in good shape. That's the Miami Dolphins, Eric. They're actually 25-1 to go 0-16, which seems like a pretty good bet at this point. But it was,
I'll put $100 on that.
They got absolutely throttled 59-10 in their home opener, and they made Lamar Jackson look like the second coming of Johnny Unitas or something out there. Just an ugly performance. Oh my God, Eric, they gave up a touchdown to RG3 for God's sake. So completely awful. But Eric, after it was reported, Mike Florio came out and said that Miami players were already calling their agents, trying to get their way out of town, because they see the writing is on the wall that this is going to be a lost season for them. You saw Jadeveon Clowney visit them when the Texans were trying to work out a trade. He said, hell no, I do not want to be in Miami. So how ugly could this situation in Miami get this year?
It couldn't be any uglier unless they added Antonio Brown to the roster, which, maybe he'll be available in a couple of days. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But wow, for an NFL franchise, you thought you saw it bad with the Browns. And I think really with the Browns, what you saw was just a decade of losing, to where, they had high draft picks and they weren't working out and they just couldn't get anything going. What we're seeing with the Dolphins is that you're almost looking back and saying, wow, we were almost better off when our O-line coaches were sniffing cocaine. Like, it's that crazy, to where it's worse now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Unbelievable. And they make this trade in the offseason to get Rosen, and you think, okay, he's going to have a chance to be a franchise quarterback. Well, Fitzpatrick wins the starting job and leads them into mediocrity in week 1. But when you find out that there's that many people within the locker room, and look, I think it's a bad precedent, actually. Players demanding with their agents that they want out of town. It's kind of a continuation of the other things we've dealt with for months with, guys like AD and in the NBA. And I just think that there are bad precedents being set here. But if you have a multitude of players in your locker room saying that, then clearly your franchise is absolutely destroyed. It's gone, and no one wants to be there. Free agents don't want to be there. Your current players don't want to be there. They're talking after week 1. Who knows how long the head coach is going to be there? It's basically a dumpster fire. The fact that they could go 0-16 seems like more of a reality than any other bet in the NFL right now.
I think it's absolutely a possibility because of this factor. We saw this years ago with the 76ers, where they were absolutely in tank mode. The difference is guys play pickup basketball all the time. It's not that hard to go out and give a full effort on a basketball court, to play hard, to play defense, to try, because you can go out and play pickup basketball all the time. In the NFL, it's different. Number one, you have a shorter shelf life. Number two, you're out there putting your life at risk when you play football. One bad play, we saw it Monday night, a guy get carted off with taking a leg to the top of the head, one of the stranger ways you'll see someone get carted off.
Scary, right.
And it was just a split second where he was trying to make a tackle and gets hit